thinking we should go ahead and get started. And my name is Kathy Perillo, and I'm here from Rural Roots. I'm actually not on the board anymore. I have been on the board for a while, but I've been doing a lot of volunteering with them. And our theme for today is pollinators, and that's related to the upcoming Pollinator Summit in February, gosh, 23rd and 24th, I think are the right days, 22, 23, or 24, 2 of those days. And I don't have the notes in front of me, sorry. Rural Roots is a organization over 20 years old, headquartered in Moscow, but it's had a presence in Idaho and Eastern Washington for the last 20 years. And we focus on especially small farms and sustainable production practices. And the definition of small is up to whoever wants to self-identify that way. And tonight's guest is Brad Jaeckel from the WSU Organic Farm, otherwise known as the Eggert Farm. And he's going to talk about some of the pollinator work that they do on the farm and probably a few other things about the farm itself. And I also work at WSU, so Brad and I have worked together for quite a few years, not closely together, more in parallel, and we touch base. So I'm really looking forward to what he has to tell us about tonight and all the new things that are going on out there and some of the results of continuing things. I'm going to suggest that if questions come up, if you type them into the chat, I'll be monitoring that. And if there's a natural break or time for questions, or else we'll do them at the end. But go ahead and put them straight into the chat, and then they're all captured as you have them. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brad.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. And yeah, we have known each other. I think, you know, right when I started at WSU, yeah, you were really welcoming, and I remember working with you when I started at the organic farm. So now it's called the Eggert Family Organic Farm. But back in 03, 04, when it was starting, yeah, it didn't even have a name. We just called it the Organic Farm. But this is where we are now. It's actually our second location since I've been there. The first location was in the old Tukey Orchard, which let's see, in this picture on the right, we're looking to the east, and this is kind of where my cursor is. The edge of the orchard is over here, but we moved to this new site. Oh, and see, actually in this lower picture, you can see it better. This is the Tukey Orchard over here, the airport. There's Moscow Mountain. So around 2010, 29, we started working on developing this new site. We just needed to get into some bigger space and have our own space to grow into and have more resources. So we have 10 acres certified now through Washington State Department of Ag, and I think it's actually the only certified organic ground on the Pullman campus right now. Sometimes there's research projects that come in and out, but yeah, we've kept this certified since we started, and we focus on fruits and vegetables. We have about 5 acres of the 10 in production. So this lower picture here, these are our north fields. So this is kind of our bigger growing area. With 3 large hoop houses, about 4,000 square feet of covered space there. And then over here, this is where our south field is. And there's another little one, kind of can't quite see there. And oh, my slides are going to bounce around with my cursor. So, but we do sell everything that we grow, and it's primarily a teaching farm. So we use students that are in the organic sustainable ag program or the certificate. For a lot of our labor, they do have a requirement to work at the farm. But after that, if they want to continue, we keep them on. And so we get a great crew of students, usually every year. Some years are a little different than others, but again, we can't do it without them, and it's really important. So tonight, that was just a little background. I want to jump right in, and we're going to focus on pollinators, beneficials, and biocontrol. So just quickly, let's get some definitions out of the way. So you know what I'm talking about for each of these. Pollinators, like Kathy explained, that's going to be our primary focus, and we're looking at mostly insect pollinators, okay? And beneficials are also going to be primarily insect beneficials as well. Anything that controls pests in the farmer garden that's an insect, we're going to refer to as a beneficial insect. And then biocontrol, this is a big broad term. I know it means different things to different people, but what we're going to talk about is any kind of biological organism in our farmscape that also helps control pests. And we're going to focus on birds of prey, primarily controlling rodent pests on that. So we'll have a little bit about that. And when I think about these three things, I actually really am excited about this talk, because this is an easy one for me. I really have dove in, I guess, to trying to discover what works on the WSU organic farm. And then I also have my own kind of mini farm in Moscow. My wife and I have Orchard Farm. It's just about 1.5 acres, and we have transitioned our gardens. We have about 0.5 acre in gardens here, and it's primarily in cut flowers and perennial flowers now. So I'll show a lot about that, but really just diversity is such a big takeaway when we talk about any of these topics. I think that's just comes to the top of my mind as being really one of the most important traits when we're talking about how do we work with either providing habitat for pollinators or beneficials. How do we incorporate biocontrols? We're basically adding more to our farmscape or gardenscape, and anytime you're adding any of these positive new things, that's creating diversity, and that's really, I think, a more I think it's just a healthier farmscape to be working with. So these each require habitat, and we'll talk about that, and they each require planning, and so we'll talk about that as well. We're going to see a lot of nice pictures, so love doing these talks in the wintertime when everybody's getting jazzed about the growing season. It's been beautiful on the Palouse this week. We're almost pushing 50 degrees today, which is pretty incredible. But here's a shot on our south field, and we really grow a diversity of vegetables. We do probably about 15 of the main garden vegetables on the farm. So this next slide is from Xerxes Society, and I use this one a lot in my talks, and it really kind of helps explain some of these ideas that we can make our farms more hospitable to pollinators, beneficials, and other organisms, but we really have to think about what those organisms need to survive. So number one, they need food, and along with that, they need water, and they need it all season long. So we want to bring these pollinators and beneficials and other organisms into our farmscape, and that requires that we have food sources for them. And so thinking about that really kind of requires a different little level of acknowledgement that, one, I have to understand what they need, and two, I got to figure out how I'm going to provide that. Do I have it already, or do I need to do something different to provide that? Shelter is critical. This is habitat. So undisturbed overwintering habitat is really, really critical. And so what I want to point out in the slide is that you can see kind of these edge areas on the left here where we have, this is maybe a hedgerow windbreak planting. That's critical for that overwintering areas. So it's like these edge areas where those insects, pollinators can have space to go and live. And thinking about, they're going to be nesting in leaf litter, grass. They could go underground. They could be within a tree or shrub. So there's really a variety of places they need or are interested in overwintering. Tall grasses, brushy areas, critical. So having that kind of close by is really good. And then as you kind of look across here, there's different ways these kind of red areas are incorporated, maybe plantings that are interplanting in the vegetable crops. And we do this a lot within our vegetable crops and our fruit crops to provide areas where during the growing season, we've got places for these insects to go get food and water. And that's really important in the heat of the summer. Okay, and then taking good care of those guys, minimizing any dangerous things for those. Okay, and I'm going to share some planning resources. The good thing about this talk is it's going to get recorded, so don't get stressed out if you miss this. You can go back into the recording and find this. And I think that's one of the great things about doing these on Zoom is it's there for you in the future. Xerxes Society is at least national, a great resource. Jump on their website and you'll see an amazing amount of information. Phoenix Conservancy is another one. They're actually doing a talk tonight with the Palouse Conservation District, and they do a lot of work locally on habitat restoration, native pollinators, and beneficials. So check out Phoenix Conservancy as well. And then here's just a couple other things. Plant species. This is just a list put out by NRCS, but it's specific to the Palouse region. And then the third bullet here is a technical publication that NRCS put out locally, also on the Palouse region, and lots of great lists. And they really break it down on how to provide habitat for really specific groups of organisms, and it includes tons of information about plant species, and they break it down by precipitation. So check those out. Here's a cool shot of a globe thistle with a friendly pollinator on there. Okay, moving into planning. So these are the things I think of when I do a lot of my farm planning, and kind of made this special to think about what we're talking about tonight. So, you know, if you're new to this, or even if you are already into it, I think these are important things to put on your to-do list. So mapping, and I'm going to show you an example of how we map at Eggert Farm. That's really important. Just kind of keep track of what you do have, and maybe help you figure out where you want to go with your plantings. Doing a plant inventory. What do you have? What are your resources already in your farm or garden or your homestead that are existing? So that's going to tell you maybe something unique about your property or your farm, just by knowing what already is existing there. You can clue into that. And do you have a wet location? Do you have a cold spot? Do you have a windy spot? So looking at those existing plants is really important. Water resources are critical. All these organisms are going to need water. And if you're really talking about putting in plantings, then you need to have that resource also considered. Learning about your USDA zone. Once you start getting into perennial plantings, you're going to want to know what perennials are going to be able to survive in your zone. You want to know what your growing season is. That's going to be your frost-free zone, and really critical for those annuals that you'll be interested in planting. Tuning into your local nurseries, places where you can get seeds that are maybe regional even, is really great. We can talk about those later too, if that comes up. And then plant care. How are you going to take care of these plants and habitats that you, if you're going to put in all this planning, you want to know how to take care of this stuff for you guys. So looking at our map here, this is for our Eggert farm. And this is, we were lucky enough to have a landscape architect on the crew for quite a few years. And she was gracious enough to make this nice map, but it's an overlay on a Google map, and Google Maps, super easy to work with, readily available. You don't have to necessarily make it look like this, but I think it's a great place to get a template. Then you can add to that. So this is the 10 acres that we're dealing with, and I guess I'll give you a quick tour here. So here is Terraview Road down on this east side, and that's going out to the airport. Main campus is to the west over past this point. So we got two roads on our sides. These big circles were existing locust or maple trees that we had, but then along this edge we have put in windbreaks along here, and around this side has windbreaks all the way around here. So single and double row, deciduous and evergreen trees. This is the south growing area. We've got some, well, we had tried to put raspberries in there and those didn't go so good. So we've actually started to incorporate more windbreaks because we are very exposed from these southwest winds coming in. Our main orchard is on the west side here. We have got about 300 or so fruit trees, nut trees in this area. So we got a lot of fruit that we need to get pollinated. And then these are our north fields over here, the hoop houses, the greenhouse. And then this east area was really too steep to plant on. So these little green guys are bioswales, and I'll show you a picture and explain how those work. But we put in quite a few native non-irrigated trees and shrubs in this area that we're trying to establish. So this is one of our bigger areas close to the farm that we're trying to get established. Okay, and then a few more tips on planting. Checking out your USDA plant hardiness map is going to tell you what zone you are in, and that's going to be the limiting factor when you're looking at perennial trees and shrubs specifically. You want to make sure that you're choosing trees that are hardy enough to survive in your location. Determining your growing season, this is an easy thing to do from this website. Just putting in your zip code, it'll spit out pretty quick information and give you a range of what is most likely going to be your frost-free zone with some other percentages. And from that, you can really start to figure out, well, if I'm looking at my annuals, how many days to maturity do I need to be looking at for those varieties that you want to grow? And on the Palouse here, we've got a lot of microclimates. So at the Eggert farm, I'm able to grow some crops, maybe even up to 110 days. But at my home in Moscow, we're in this cold pocket. We really have to be careful. I don't even look at things that are, over 100 plus days. We try to keep things down to like in the 90-day range for the home farm. So that microclimate makes a big difference here on the Palouse, and you really want to make note of what you've got. Okay, plant selection. Okay, now we're going to start getting into the fun stuff. Here's a picture on the left. This is my home farm in Moscow, and our garden site is, like I mentioned, it's primarily in cut flowers. So Kate has the last few years really gotten excited about putting this in, and we work together on putting in the garden every year. And she has a cut flower CSA, and she sells bouquets off the farm, farmer's market. But it's something that we've both really gotten excited about over the last few years. And so I'll share more about that garden. And then this picture, that's primarily annuals, okay? So this area that you're looking at right there, we really go heavy on the annuals. We have some perennials that are stuck around in our edge areas. We've got a lot of boxes, grow boxes, raised boxes that we put in bulbs in. So we've kind of found, what works for us to treat those perennials with some extra care, but primarily we're looking at annuals for those cut flowers. And then again, here's this picture of the Eggert farm. So you can just see we have a lot of grassy area. Those bioswales are over this edge here. You can't really see them there. You can see this is Airport Creek. So we do have some, kind of wild or treed area that's close to the farm, but nothing really right on farm. We're kind of starting from scratch to build that up. And the foreground here is some native roses that we've put in, trying to secure steep slopes. And you see there's a lot of terrain on site. We're going to use natives where we can, and natives are always going to be a great choice. So these are going to be species that are native to whatever your location is. So we're looking at those lists of native trees and shrubs in particular, even some of the lower growing grasses and flowering plants as well. Cover crops, that refers to, for us, it's mostly going to be crops that we put in the bigger farmscape where we're not going to be harvesting that crop. We're primarily going to put it in as a way to get that soil covered, add nutrients to that soil as that crop degrades. When it finishes, it'll be turned under. But some of the cover crops are amazing pollinator crops as well. So we'll talk about a few of those as we get into this. Hey, let's do a quick stop here. There's a couple questions. No questions yet, just goals. Yeah, well, we got a lot of goals. Okay, does anybody have any other questions? If you do, type it in real quick and we can hit it. Okay, well, feel free to do that as we move ahead. My computer's frozen. There we go. Okay, so more pictures. This is in the annual group, all these flowers. So starting on the left here, this is one of our workhorses at Orchard Farm. This is calendula. And it's a flower that Kate uses a ton of in her, she also makes body products, soaps, lotions, lip balms, those types of things. And calendula is a high resin flower, has some amazing skin care properties. And we grow this really like as a vegetable in rows. It bushes out so you can kind of see this is the plant behind the basket. And what's cool about this calendula is that it puts on a lot of flowers. So I can put a single row in. You really need about 3 feet of width to just handle how bushy this plant ends up getting. And then we pick these flowers probably twice a week, and that just encourages more flower growth. So we're essentially deadheading these, but picking the mature flowers down here to be dried for Kate's product. But what that does is that just continually provides flowers for the entire growing season. And this flower starts early. It can self-seed, and you can get a very early crop off of those. And it also is very frost hardy. It does great in cold spots, and it'll go into October. So I really recommend this one, and the bugs love it as a pollinator, as a beneficial. It's great. So that's a really important one for us. Sweet peas, just another example. Again, another, this is a cut flower crop, but one that you can start early. And if you are in a cooler area, like for us, these sweet peas, we can have them last most of the summer. You can do repeated plantings of those. So there's some techniques like that to ensure that you're getting a flowering crop for as long as you can. And when you start looking at the different options out there and annuals, it's really important to think about, okay, how am I going to have flowers all the time? And so when we're looking at our kind of cut flower bouquet side of the business, we're really trying to tailor that to different seasons of the season, right? So not everything's going to be available all the time, but it's important to think about that. And then here's a picture of this is the old farm. We had incorporated a U-pick flower garden into our CSA program. So I always liked this idea. We essentially included this U-pick option for a vegetable CSA. So we would allow our members to come and harvest flowers from the farm like once a week when they came to pick up their box. And it just always provided, this diverse flower area within the garden. It would rotate year to year where it was, but it was just a nice guarantee that we were always going to have some added diversity in our farmscape. Okay, and then this is our short list on our great cut flowers for pollinators. And I had to quiz Kate this week to find out her special flowers that she spends a lot of time out there in the summer, not only because she's working out there, but it's just such a fun place to be. And tuning in to just the amazing amount of organisms that are flying around in this, really, it's not that big of a garden, but we've just noticed just this huge population now, both pollinators and beneficials, more birds. Like we've just got more of everything since we've been doing this at our home. And so she's tuned into which ones are doing really well. These are zinnias, 2 different varieties of zinnias here. And again, zinnias kind of work similarly to calendula. You're going to be cutting these essentially every week or twice a week, and getting these flower plants to continually put out new blossoms. The hummingbird moths love these. And one of the things that I really remember when I was learning about how to attract these pollinators and beneficials is that you want to think about incorporating different sizes of flowers into your design. And not only am I talking about the size of the plant itself, but the size of the flowers, the petals, the head of the flower itself. Because we have such a diversity in insect populations, they need that variety of size to access. So just it always struck me as something, I just hadn't thought about, but it makes a ton of sense. The smaller insects need smaller flowers, bigger insects are going to be onto the bigger flowers. So these zinnias can end up being really big and showy, and those hummingbird moths, they're big. And I mean, they're literally the size of a small hummingbird, and they get all over those. So zinnias are great. Forget-me-nots, snapdragons. Another cool thing with the snapdragons is that is cold hardy. It can actually self-seed, or it can return again in the spring if you let it overwinter. Black-eyed Susans, this is a great one. And there's, with all these lots of different varieties of each of them. Clary sage and sweet peas I already mentioned. So counted it up, we probably grow about 60 different types of flowers, and that's not including multiple varieties like zinnias. We probably have 5 or 6 different varieties just in our zinnia patch. So 60 plus flowers. That's going to include bulbs as well. That's a lot of different plants. Okay, great. So back to Eggert Farm, we're still in annuals. These are 2 really big workhorses for us at Eggert Farm. So this one on the left is Phacelia. This is Lacy Phacelia. Actually, just in my research for the presentation, saw there's a couple of native Phacelias in our area, but they're lighter in color. This one's purple. And then sunflowers. So the way we do the Phacelia is, this is right below our orchard, and Phacelia is known as an excellent pollinator flower, but also a great beneficial. So the predatory wasps really like Phacelia, and those predatory wasps are what are able to come into your farmscape, and they'll go after small-bodied, soft insect pests like aphids. So not only do the pollinators love it, but the beneficials do as well. Then on the left, the sunflowers, we interplant these in our squash and pumpkin patch. So it's just randomized. We seed those in the greenhouse, and then we transplant those in row wherever we're putting that crop in each year. So just a couple of different examples of how you can, within your farmscape, put in some pretty big areas. And, the larger your area is, your orchard, your farm, you really need to bump it up and add more of these plants. So there's a close-up of that Phacelia. Turns out this is a good cut flower too. So we're growing this at home, and it can be seeded multiple times. We start this pretty early, probably by early May, late April. I'll start seeding this every couple weeks, and you can't seed this much past July. It takes a while for it to get the flower, but it will hold a long time. And like in that previous shot, that big area is largely self-seeded every year. Okay, now jumping into perennials. This is a short list, okay? And I'm not going to share everything because it just is going to be too big. But some of the highlights on the perennials, the ones that I really like to grow at home, are echinacea, yarrow, globe thistle. Those, I guess 3 or 4 do really well together. And those are things that I can seed easily here and get started and keep those going. And we put those under drip irrigation. They do really well. Daffodils, just an example in this photo on the right. We planted these daffodils when we put in the orchard around the base of the trees, more as a rodent deterrent, which they are, but it's great. They come up every year and we've got an early flower there. So, coming up with tips to get early flowers. And then the culinary herbs. So here's lavender. You can see a butterfly right on there. The culinary herbs that I really like, lavender, thyme, sage, mint, and chives. I've just seen those being probably the most visited of the herbs. And those are perennials. And so we have areas that we can put those in and have come back year after year. Okay, and examples of that. So this picture on the left here, we're sort of in the front country of the farm. This is pretty early in the season, might even be late May, early June. We got a lot of grass. We keep that pretty well mowed closer to the farm stand, which is up here. But here are these boxes where we put all the culinary herbs, and then we have some room for annuals to go in there. So this is just a nice way to incorporate some perennials in the area. Here's some native roses along that steep hillside. I don't want people walking up in there. I want to protect that hillside. Roses are perfect for that. And there's lavender again. I didn't want people like traipsing all through here. So they're kind of small still, but they're getting there. Those lavender are doing great. And we really don't water these guys very much. The herb boxes maybe once a week. Over here on the right, oh, I skipped ahead. On the right, this is a wetland area near the farm. And again, you can just see, this isn't adjacent to the farm. It's about maybe a quarter mile away. But this has a cattail area in this wetland. We've got it sort of restored. When we started taking care of it, we had to clean it up, get the old fences out. We put new fences up, keeping the cows out, and adding things like elderberry and roses and willows along this wetland area. And it's honestly growing every year by probably up to 5 feet. It's expanding. So it's really cool to see. And this is just a great area to have close by the farm. All right, then down here is an example of the bioswale. So again, this is on the east side of the farm. This is a picture from today, and the swale's doing exactly what I wanted it to do. You can see this is a raised part. Slopes going this way, and in this swale, then I'm capturing snow. And we don't irrigate anything down here. This is probably one of the more healthy examples where we've got a variety of shrubs and trees. We're putting in currants, snowberry, elderberry, locusts. There's a few other I'm forgetting, but we don't water this at all. These get added to every fall. We transplant new trees, either that we've propagated ourselves or we've purchased. We put those in the fall, and I think our success rate for those type of areas are better with a fall planting. Here's a question. Let's see what we got. Okay, looking on growing a canopy for shade. Okay, let's come back to that one. That's a good question. All right, so now moving on to some of the other organisms that are in our biocontrol toolbox. And well, one is mason bees, okay? And we are lucky enough that at the Eggert farm, we're like neighbors with the honeybee program, and they have honeybee hives everywhere. So we're kind of covered on the honeybees, and that's awesome. We really try to grow, like I've shown, some crops that can support those really well. But this is a picture of a mason bee house that's at my home, and this has been really fun. This one I checked out this morning, and the tubes are kind of scattered around. We've lost about half of them. We had some songbirds take nest in there. They kicked out half of the tubes and made a little nest in there. But the mason bees are a really important native pollinator, and so they take different forms. There's solitary bees. There's some that will use leaf matter to make, in these tubes, they'll lay their cocoons, and then they'll seal off the end of that tube either with a leaf matter or a mud. And so having like fresh, green leafy material all season long, having some wet areas where these bees can get some mud is really essential. So it's been fun to see, yeah, we've got them. They're there. If we provide some habitat, we can create some space for them to lay their cocoons and make some more mason bees for the area. And they're a great pollinator. Bats are actually known as pollinators. This is a bat box. So just on the side of our shed, this is something that you can look up and build yourself. If you want to try to get bats on the farm, they're good as a pollinator. Also, great insect control. And then here on the right side, this is a homemade mason bee tube. One of my students is doing a project on these, and we're going to be putting up these tubes. This is all like from just recycled PVC throwaway parts. We purchased the tubes and then zip tie that to a post on the fence is probably what we're going to do to put that up and give us an idea of what we've got going on around the farm if we put those in different places. Okay, and then on to our raptors. And I really love this part of the group. And these are biocontrols. These raptors are something that exists in our environment, but if we can provide habitat or roosts or a nest box or anything to get them onto the farm, we're going to try to either discourage rodents or pest birds or just get the rodents eaten. So we've got a few different tactics. So starting on the left here, this is an owl box. So I purchased this and actually put it up inside one of the barns that's close by the farm, just as a hope to get barn owls in there. Barn owls can eat up to 2,000 rodents in a single year. So if you got a rodent problem, I'd encourage you to bring in some habitat for owls. Owls do not make their own nests, so it's an important thing to note. They will use other birds' nests. Barn owls, classic example, they don't have to have a nest. They can live like within a barn. They'll make their own space there, but it's important to know they don't make their own. They will use something else. And then the hawks, we've got beautiful resident hawks that are year-round on the farm, and we've put quite a few of these roosts up. This is on our southwest ridge, so the orchard's right here, and this slope breaks away, and they just love sitting up here. This pole's probably, well, the fence is 7 feet high, so the pole's got to be pushing 20 feet. So the higher the better. This is just metal pipe threaded together. It's DIY. So we put these up along a fence post on the perimeter. They're also within the farmscape in the middle of different areas. So put those up in places where you got rodent problems, and they'll go to it. Okay, and then on the right here is a kestrel box and another purchase box. We just put it on a 4x4 post facing the entrance to the east. Kestrel is another native raptor. And all three of these, they get along, they can coexist. I have seen kestrels on our farm. They fly like a hummingbird, hover over a rodent they want to eat and go for it. So they're amazingly fast, agile, but they can hover like a hummingbird. So they're really fun to watch. So that's probably our big push on the biocontrols with the raptors, getting those involved with the farm and getting them comfortable and just in the area. So a few more examples of that. The top right, this is one of our resident hawks just sitting on our Mamma Mia light post, and this is right by our barn. I mean, I'm probably 10 feet from that bird, and it's just calm as can be. They just have gotten comfortable at the farm. We probably have 3 pairs of hawks that are residents in the area now, and they've kind of gotten to know the place and are comfortable there. So that's really good. Here's the barn where we put up the owl box, but barn owls are just, we see them in there all the time. Students that come to close up the farm at night stick their head in there and they're like, oh yeah, barn owls are in there. So, this is a classic example of just a big shed barn that's got plenty of rafter space, perfect for barn owls. So that's cool to have nearby. And then this is back last summer, I think, from my home farm, our Pacific tree frog, native, hanging out on an echinacea leaf. This is kind of like my nursery area. So a place that I water a lot, usually daily. I've got, potted plants that are coming up for planting, or I'm just holding on to, and the frogs love it, and they're going to get after the bugs as well. So those amphibians are really telltale species. If they're on your farm, you're doing a good job. You have a clean farm. They can't handle herbicide and other heavy chemicals. So if you have those, you're doing a good job, and they really will thrive in the right environment. Okay, and then I'm going to throw a little bit of organic teaching at you, because what is cool about everything that I'm explaining, if you are an organic producer or interested in becoming certified organic, there's a requirement that you have to maintain or improve your natural resources. So in your system plan, you come across a page like this, and this is directly out of the WSDA system plan for natural resources. And they give you this like number 3 question, what are the following practices that you use to maintain biological diversity? And it's just check them off. And this is right out of the NRCS game book. And these are all techniques or ways that are encouraged by NRCS to improve your natural resources. And so when we look at this, there's just so many that we can click off the list. I wanted to show you that everything that we're talking about counts towards your certification and makes this part of the plan super easy. So there's another, we don't get into the riparian because the Eggert farm doesn't have any streams, riparian areas, but these other 2 areas, we have a ton of those. So just wanted to share that with you. And then we're getting close to the end here. How are we doing on time? Yeah, perfect. And I just want to remind everybody, get excited about this. This line of work is really fun. You can see Kate here in a couple of shots, but this one just cracks me up. This is this little girl. I think she's actually honing in on the strawberries down here. But here we are at the herb boxes, and there's a big hollyhock here. There's some, I don't know, that looks like maybe a basil going to seed. Here's some violets, there's strawberries, and the kids just love it. So having, places for people to come and see what you're doing and interact with the plants and just see the amount of insects that are flying out there. Kate's no happier than in her garden. When that season's on, that's where you're going to find her, and she loves it. And, it's really become an important part of our farm life here. And then just a fun shot of releasing ladybugs. So here's another beneficial insect that we haven't talked about, but if you've got a big pest problem, and we've had our share of aphids, go ahead and try introducing beneficials. And it is a real thrill to see those bugs go to work for you. It's money well spent, and always felt good about getting people excited about introducing insects as well. So it's a whole nother world. Okay, well, we made it through. I'm gonna come back to the questions now, and if you have other ones, feel free to ask away. Okay, so from Pam, let's go back to your question on growing a canopy for shade. Well, the only one so your question is, I'm planning on growing a canopy for shade. Do you have any recommendations for vines such as honeysuckle, clematis, hops, etc., as well as edibles like cucumbers or peas? So out of that list, I've grown hops, and they would make an incredible shade canopy, but they do need, as well as cucumbers and probably these others, they need that framework to climb on. So it could be anything from as simple as a string hanging off of a trellis post with a beam across it, but you can easily start. I'm pretty sure most of these crops here, cucumbers would be a little trickier. They are frost sensitive, so they really will only do well in the hotter months. But if you have a hot location, good sunny location, cucumbers love to climb and vine, and then you got a nice edible place for those to live. I have done loofah the last couple years. Those actually vine crazy long. So I was surprised how much more growth they had than our cucumbers that we typically grow in our hoop houses. So I think you've got some options there for working with those. And I do not have information on composting toilets. Sorry about that. Yeah, any other questions related to what we're talking about tonight?
Brad, what have you been growing for your windbreak plants, and what type of things do you consider for those?
Yeah. The windbreaks. So this was this is really like one of the big bummers of moving to the Eggert farm. It was all pasture, right? So, you know, we had to put in the fences. There were no windbreaks. And when we left Tukey, we just realized we totally took the established windbreaks for granted over there. It's taking longer than I thought. And, you know, it's something that is just going to take time. But the species that we've focused on, this picture here that's still on the slide has windbreaks. They're not that big, but we've done an alternating pattern where we're doing like Austrian or limber pines alternating with a hybrid poplar. So we're trying to just get some, you know, fast growth with the hybrid poplar, while the Austrians and the limbers, you could even use ponderosa in there. But those three evergreens, they handle our wind well. They're not super fast growing. So those are what we've focused on. We're starting to get them, you know, some that are up to 10 feet tall, but it's, yeah, it's a slow process on those. And we have had some trouble again with the rodents. I mean, that's why I bring up the rodent control. We've got a variety of gophers, voles, and field mice, and they attack everything. Not only our veggies, but those trees. And so we really have to keep an eye on that. We're using plastic tubes around the bases of those and really trying to get drip irrigation on those trees while we're in the establishment phase. But yeah, those are doing pretty well, and they're getting there. So I think they're going to continue to bush out and be good trees down the road.
Do you have a shrub layer in there with them, or any, you know, flowering, anything? I didn't know if that came into your plan.
No, we didn't add that in. We didn't really have the room to make as wide a windbreak as I'd wanted to. So, you know, if the real like best practice classic windbreak would be a 5-row, where you have that, you know, small to large transition. And we didn't quite have that. We've got, I think there's one area where we have a double row going. And, you know, as I lose trees, I'll throw something else in there. I'm not going to get stuck with those species. If I just happen to be at the nursery and find a tree to replace it, I'm going to throw something else in and give it a shot. Yeah, but the shrubs that I mentioned for the swales would do well in a windbreak. So dogwood, the red osier dogwood is fantastic. The currants are awesome. The elderberries are amazing. The elderberries, I'm just blown away how fast those can get to size. We can get an elderberry up to 20 foot in height and almost in girth in probably 3-4 years, and that's without irrigation. So it's fun to kind of focus in on those. The roses, those fill in really nicely. So, you know, if you can put in the Nootka or the woods rose, those are our two main native roses. Get those established. You don't need to put those very close at the beginning, because they will spread and they will pop up. And just we've put in some beautiful rose hedgerows at my home farm, and they make great privacy breaks, but as like a low, you know, 6 to 8 foot tall hedge. You know, there's some non-native roses that'll get that high and do well. And again, those roses are awesome for the pollinators. And then you got the rose hips on there for your animals in the wintertime. So let me look at these.
Yeah, there's a bunch in the chat that came in while we were talking.
Okay, great. Do I make houses for the frogs? No, I don't make any. I don't even know if that is a thing, but I love them. And I just noticed, like, you know, they kind of gravitate to those wet areas. And we, at the Eggert farm, they will come into our barn. It's, you know, it's like a pole building, so it's not super sealed in. We'll find a tree frog in the sink like every day. They just get in there. So apparently pole barns would work. Would the raptors go after cats or small dogs? I have not had any problems with that. And that's something to think about if your cats are indoor cats and not used to being outside. Then I would be cautious about that. But they typically leave them alone, especially if they've got other things they're interested in. That's a cat and a dog that's just a little too big, I think, for most of the raptors. I mean, they'd have to really be hungry to go after those guys. Fastest way to break up hard soil. Well, I think cover cropping is probably going to be, again, really critical. Maybe using that in conjunction with some heavy equipment that could do some ripping. I know, Sue Ann, you're probably talking about your home garden, so we should come take a look at that. I know, you know, the hillsides, like, especially even in this picture, we've had hillsides like this that are tough soil to break into on the Palouse. Okay, I mentioned daffodils. For repelling rodents. So we have looked into this, and it's a great question. Like, gosh, you know, we've got so much damage from these rodents. There's got to be other things that would repel them. There's a castor oil is repelling, and castor oil is made from the castor plant, which I don't think is actually a great fit for the Palouse. I'm trying to remember when I've researched that. It's I want to say more tropical or subtropical type plants. And Susan says it is a thing for the tree frogs, so you can do some habitat for them. Okay, that's awesome. I will look into that. Yeah, well, they're a joy to have around. They're just they really are wonderful to listen to at night in the summer when they're out. So that would be fun to encourage.
Okay, any more questions for Brad? Loved all your pictures.
I'm here asking a question. You can't see me. This is Suvia. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Hi, Suvia.
Yeah. Hi. I know some people in the permaculture community will plant bulbs, including alliums. I myself would not mix like garlic or those multiplier onions. I would not mix them with daffodils because of the risk of eating daffodils, which are horribly toxic. But if you don't plan to harvest them at all, you can plant either daffodils or alliums. I, again, don't recommend mixing them because of the danger of eating daffodils, which are highly toxic. But some people plant those in rings around their fruit trees when they plant them. I haven't tried it myself. I generally put hardware cloth in a wide cylinder sunk into the ground when I plant trees to keep the voles and various kinds of diggers from going after the roots. And there's some things that have more attractive roots, like if you plant chestnuts, they're just super, super, super attractive to ground squirrels and voles. So it's really, apparently really necessary. Certainly mine all got eaten when I didn't use hardware cloth around them. So anyway, hardware cloth, you know, for below ground, going a couple of feet above ground and then coming up above ground, wide enough out that the trunk won't ever hit it. is one thing, and then planting. I know Denise Moffat out in Derry plants Elk Meadows Farm plants alliums and things around her fruit trees to repel rodents. So that's what I can add to the discussion.
Yeah. Is Denise on here? Can she speak to that? Oh, yeah. We use garlic close to the trunk. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, garlic's fantastic because it's like even in an unirrigated area, you can grow that. And if you are irrigating, that would be an easy addition. Okay, so we use garlic close to the trunk and daffodils 15-inch away in a ring about 4 inches apart. Yeah, thanks, Denise. Good tip.
I wonder if chives would work too. Like they're really easy to plant.
Yeah, chives are super easy. I mean, they reproduce. The one thing I've noticed on the chives is that we have to divide those clumps pretty regularly because they tend to be a little bit spreading. But yeah, I mean they don't have maybe the bulb power that a garlic would under the ground. Chives seem to be water hogs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they like the water. They maybe not so great in unirrigated or low irrigation. Yeah, garlic. If that would be the key attribute to the garlic, is that it'd be an easy one to grow in that almost any situation.
Okay, unless anyone has a last burning question, I think it's time to say thank you, Brad, for a really fun presentation and lots of information. And we'll work on getting those. We probably have some of those resources on the Rural Roots website, but maybe not all of them. So we'll probably work towards building that up too. So good resources for us too.
Everybody remember to come to the Pollinator Conference on the 23rd and the 24th and hear more of these great ideas.
Yes, thank you, Suvia. Okay, everyone, have a great evening, rest of your evening.
Yeah, good luck growing this year.